Welcome viewers to Hotline with Dookie on ITV. Thank you for joining us. Enhancing food security ought to be any government's priority. In other words, only when a nation can feed itself is it truly independent. Trinidad and Tobago food import bill stands at $7.3 billion annually. For a country with ideal weather patterns, vast areas of agricultural lands, and a government standing behind farmers, that bill should be reduced. We know that there are challenges, issues like perdial larceny, bushfires, problem with accessing the right chemicals and so on. But let's welcome into the program the President of the Agriculture Society for Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Daryl Rampersad. Welcome, Mr. Rampersad, to Hotline. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Sure. Good afternoon to the listeners as well.
Yes. Mr. Rampersad, last week I heard the Trade Minister, Kama Maraj, he was complaining about the annual food import bill. And I remember back in 2025 as Trade Minister when he said that this is not just a promise, but it's an initiative that the government intends to take on, a buy local campaign, and it will take the country by storm. What comes to your mind where we stand today after the minister had made that statement?
Right. So, you see, first of all, what comes to my mind is our daily consumables. And well, remember, I represent the agriculture sector. So, first of all, I would start to think about what is in production, what do we produce as a country that is being utilized by our farmers, what support is given to our farmers in terms of value-added products and so on. Because when he spoke as well as Trade Minister, I believe they are also speaking on behalf of agro-processors, manufacturers, and all these things.
Yes,
looking at the food import bill, right? Mm-hmm. Taking into consideration that what makes up the food import bill would also contain things like cereals and all these things that we import heavily. Not to mention alcohol and cigarettes also are part of the food import bill as well, which we don't usually mention. But I'm assuming that all these things has been taken into consideration. But from the agriculture aspect, what we take into consideration, we still have commodities that can safely be grown in Trinidad and Tobago that is being imported heavily into Trinidad and Tobago. And these are some of the things that we need to look at. We have a livestock sector that is limping, right? So in terms of the importation of dairy products and cheese and all these are things that can be made if the support is given into the livestock sector for expansion. But we need to look at the underlying issues affecting the farmers in the different sectors before we can start to, discuss how much we use and why we are importing the amount as well too.
What are some of the issues affecting the farmers, let's say, in the livestock industry?
Right. So, for example, in the livestock industry, what you would have seen is a rather dilapidated livestock sector. And one of the first issues that was underlined was that AI service that was being provided. Right. So, first of all, we need to look at that because when we have animals coming into their cycle and so on, breeding of the animals and so on are essential, especially the maintenance of the cycle to ensure that we are producing milk and all these things. So first we need to look at that main issue that comes from the livestock sector, which would be the availability of the artificial insemination services. I believe this is something that is recently tackled by the new line Minister of Agriculture, the Honorable Ravi Ratiram, but this is something that we need to take into consideration. The price as well that was then being offered to the farmers. We went from producing and purchasing tanks of milk to producing and selling barrels of milk instead, right? Or liters of milk. So our milk production is significantly lower as it would have been in the last couple of years gone by.
Therefore, therefore, right now, you are saying that we have to import milk.
We have to. We don't have a choice based upon what is being produced here. And if we don't look into the necessary support for the livestock sector, we will continue to import, and we will have to continue to import in bigger volumes as well too. Because when you think about milk is just one aspect, and when you look at other processed items such as cheese and yogurt and all these items as well, ghee and all these things make up part of that sector, come from the dairy sector. But if we are not producing a significant amount of milk, which is the base product, all these other line items in which we look at, is only then we can start to speak about value-added products, but we need to look at the base issues.
There are key advancements and initiatives in Trinidad and Tobago agriculture sector, which includes technology and modernization. How much do farmers implement that?
As a matter of fact, we're speaking about implementation. Let's go back another footstep again. In terms of accessibility to agricultural knowledge on these new systems that you may be speaking about. So we see that there's a new National Agricultural Training Initiative, NATI, that is taking place. It started probably about a month ago to bring that agricultural knowledge to the farming community. The ASCT, in which I head, is one of the organizations that is also tasked with the dissemination of agricultural knowledge. But even us, we are very, very stifled for funding. Hence it is that we cannot execute some of the programs properly because we are starved for funding and so on. So first of all, we need to deal with agricultural knowledge because you need to train the farmers to use the new technologies in agriculture. You need to have an introduction. So some of the farmers that you may see involved in, let's say, greenhouse farming and hydroponic systems and so on, some of them are self-taught farmers. They went on the internet and they look up something and they wanted to mitigate the risk in agriculture. So they would, do their investments and get involved. So again, the initiative that was just started, we want to commend it, but we need to make sure that it reaches to the, the ears of the real producing farmers and not just the backyard personnel. The farmers, the producing farmers, and we need to create the opportunity and the ease of business for the farming community as well. And later on, I will touch on the agriculture incentive program and the accessibility of the same program as well, if we talk in production and driving production within the country.
Sure, we'll talk about that later down in the show. My next question to you was on smart farming and the adoption of hydroponics, shade houses and greenhouse systems. And I see worldwide all of this is increasing. Is it fully supported by government grants to improve the resilience against climate change?
Right. So when we speak about climate change doesn't just pertain to, as some people might think, excessive rainfall. Climate change pertains to also the dry season as well, in which we have seen extended periods in the dry season. Within Trinidad and Tobago, we no longer have just a rainy or dry season because you would see sometimes
dry season.
No,
yes.
that is no more, right? So, for example, there are sometimes during the rainy season we would experience a dry spell and vice versa.
True.
During the dry season we experience some rainfall. And adoption of the technology is one. Affordability of the technology is another aspect, right? So if it is that we are looking to drive these aspects in agriculture, and we have an incentive program within Trinidad and Tobago, we need to ensure that the incentive program is accessible to the farming community because of the cost involved to get into these new systems in agriculture. Remember, a greenhouse would range from within sometimes as low as 50,000 upwards to 250,000. So there's a cost factor involved to get involved and adopt the new systems in agriculture. And if it is that we can access the incentive program, and as a farmer or a youth in agriculture, we know, well, hey, if I invest into this program, I will receive an incentive within 2 to 3 months. But instead of that, we have farmers, not just now, but in also past years, waiting 2 and 3 years to receive their incentive. So how are we to drive a sector where it is when we apply, we have nothing motivating the farmers to go forward?
I have seen in other countries, I don't know if this is so in Trinidad and Tobago, but maybe you will be able to educate our viewers about precision agriculture, where there is investment flowing into drones and so on, and precision irrigation to improve productivity, particularly among the smallholder farmers. Does the Agriculture Society encourage this? And in Trinidad and Tobago, are farmers adapting to this?
We are quite a few footsteps backward as it would pertain to utilization of drones and so on in agriculture, right? We only recently started using drones in mapping exercises and so on. As it pertains to pesticides application and so on, utilizing the drones, we have not yet gotten there, and I don't know how many listeners of yours are aware, but you now have to obtain a license in Trinidad and Tobago to operate the drones and so on according to the particular size. You have to have a license to operate the drones now, which you must go through, I believe it is civil aviation and so on, to acquire the said license. So whereas in other countries, you could go out and you could buy a drone and you could teach yourself, or you could take a class as to how to operate the drone. We now have to get a license, which I believe, is a rather tedious process. I agree that you may need it, but it's a rather tedious process for the farming community at the same time. And again, the necessary training, first of all, under the ministry itself, we don't have that necessary training available for the operation of the drone services as well. So these are some aspects that we would need to look into. So when you talk precision agriculture, it's very good. You talk about mitigating the risk involved in the agricultural sector. Because what we have now is open agriculture, right? Back to the land and so on. But we face all the common risks, including predator and natural disasters. When we talk precision agriculture, we eliminate the risk and we stand a better chance of profit margins and so on. But we are still a couple footsteps backwards in Trinidad and Tobago from there. Plenty footsteps backward from there.
Do you think this government would have an initiative to push that forward?
Well, seeing that the new minister has taken an initiative to start training programs, and he has been on the field, the society is on the field, and we see that the minister is on the field. He's doing a lot of consultations with the farming community as to what they might need and what the sector may require to move forward at the same time. So I hope that some of the information that is being collected and collated from some of these consultations that is taking place is given consideration, and some of these things is put forward for the future of agriculture within Trinidad and Tobago. Because as it is now, we don't have contract farming and so on as well. So these are some of the aspects that we might need to look at after looking at setting and going into precision agriculture. Where are we going to sell the produce and how are we going to sell the produce? It's another aspect.
So Daryl, if a farmer wants to be a part of this consultation, how do they go about this? For those who don't know.
So thus far I see that they are advertising heavily on social media and otherwise. So it's a matter of calling and booking your spaces. I believe they have online registration and so on. It's rather simple to get involved in the training programs as well. It's not a tedious process. And I always say, whilst it's commendable, we need to focus on our existing farmers, of course, because these are our daily producers, and not forgetting the youths in agriculture, because they need a lot of knowledge. They need the know-how in the agriculture sector. And one of the things that we need to consider is that when you are dealing with young people, one of the hardest tasks for these young individuals is picking up their cell phone in the morning. That's the hardest task they may have. And when they think about agriculture, they might think about it as something being very labor intensive at the same time. So we need to teach youths in agriculture from a different perspective as well. And I agree with you in terms of the point of precision agriculture, which makes agriculture more calculated, less risky, and even easier to do, as our forefathers would have had to take to the soil manually, prepare the soil, face the sun, and tote the load. Based upon these systems and their availability, it might make agriculture a little more easier and a little more attractive for the young people.
I think when the young people think about agriculture, probably the image of cane farming and that difficulty that sector went through comes to their mind, and I think it is a hard journey.
They think about hard labor.
Hard
yes,
work.
And they think about hard labor.
You think about slavery, it has a stigma with it. Daryl, I say it has a stigma with it, connected to slavery.
Correct, it does. Yes. Correct, and that is what we need to remove, and we need to input, and we need to teach agriculture from the perspective as a way of life, and how these young people can use agriculture as a way of life that is profitable. Teach them agriculture as a business. Teach them agriculture as something that they can be self-employed and work for themselves and support their family and add value to the country. That aspect is something that we need to look at.
Speaking about Purdy and larceny, I spoke to some farmers before I came in studio, and these are farmers from South Trinidad. They said the Purdy and larceny squad, the patrols are hardly there anymore. Have that been removed, or is not supported by the ministry anymore?
Right, so we have the Purdy and larceny squad, and under the last government, even myself, as the president of the society, I had called for a shutdown of the Purdy and larceny squad due to the coverage. And when I called for that, it wasn't to put anybody out of a job, it was to get the Purdy and larceny squad right. And since then, they had an addition of, I believe it was close to 80 officers under the last administration. However, one of the main issues continues to be coverage. So whilst we may have, an addition of almost 80 officers, I believe that the amount of vehicles attached to the Purdy and larceny squad is an issue. I believe it's below 15 vehicles that is in usage right now for the entire country.
Wow.
And if we talk, yes, for the entire country.
That is terrible. That is too limited.
Right. And besides that, we also need to look into probably building outstation or substations for the larceny squad. So I know that there's one in Princestown station up there in Carsonfield as well. But where the designated planting projects are, such as the Plumitan planting projects,
yes,
the Cunningham area, Orange Grove, I believe that we should have little substations in these areas in particular, where we have the concentration of agriculture to ensure that, we have the coverage in the planting projects at the same time. And another issue that we need to look into is in the increase of penalties pertaining to Purdy and larceny. Because when is the last time you heard anybody serving a 5 to 10 for Purdy and larceny? In most cases, they are served with a small fine. They might pay the fine for a couple of months and they back out onto the streets, repeating the same offense. But if it is that I know, right, that I could go to jail for make a 10 to 20 for thieving a watermelon, I don't want to put myself in that position. So we need to look at the, increasing the fines and the penalties involved for Purdy and larceny at the same time, so that these individuals know that if they're involved in Purdy and larceny, they will be put behind bars. As it is now, I don't think any of these persons see Purdy and larceny, the committing of Purdy and larceny, as any major threat involved.
That is true. I know particularly in Corial, in Princestown, where the coconut farmers, they face a challenge with Purdy and larceny. And they are victims of it, and they are not reimbursed when they lose all their crops and products. Let's take a short commercial break, and when we come back, we will be discussing reimbursement for farmers and their need for assistance and how chemicals and so on are too expensive. These are some of the complaints I got from farmers this morning, and I promised them I would introduce it in the program. We'll be right back.
Are you renewing your motor, homeowner or business insurances shortly? Then call Kalyani Limited, agency for Tatil, for a competitive quote. With 2 locations, Todd Street, El Socorro and 5 Rivers, Aruca. Please call us at 221-5051 or 227-5051. Kalyani Limited, agency for Tatil, building relationships exceeding expectations.
Who doesn't love a good story? Science is no different. Breakthroughs in medicine, technology, or astronomy didn't just happen overnight. It's stories of lucky breaks, hardships, biases, serendipity, and tragedies. Even stories that make you laugh. There were battles of ideas, sometimes lasting hundreds of years and even thousands, until we got it just right. So sit back and relax, grab that cup of tea, and join me as we explore stories from science.
Welcome back, viewers. Welcome back, Daryl, to Hotline with Dookie. Yes, before we went on the break, Daryl, I said some of the farmers complain that the cost of chemicals is too much for them, particularly the small farmers. Although the government has an agro incentive grant, the minister said there's a 5 million grant program which helps farmers. Some of them are not accessing it. What are your comments here?
Right. So as it pertains to the agricultural incentive program, we have one of the best agricultural incentive programs, probably within the entire CARICOM. Trinidad and Tobago has one of the best incentive programs, which caters to the needs of the farmers. There are a lot of things that is covered by the incentive program, including chemicals, land preparation, irrigation, fencing. If it is you want to go into greenhouse farming and all these things is covered under the program. One of the issue is, and since 2023, the Agriculture Society has been asking that we acknowledge all farmers that are in production, because as it stands now, the criteria is keeping farmers from accessing the program. Because if it is that you do not have a lease or a rental agreement for the lands in which you occupy, you cannot have a farmer's badge and you cannot access the incentive program properly. And I believe if it is that we want to drive agricultural production, we need to extend the agricultural incentive program to all farmers that are in production, not just those that hold the farmer's badge. And there are other issues underlying in the incentive program. For example, if it is that you have a farmer's badge in Princestown and you start farming, let's say in San Fernando, you cannot claim in that other area for the incentive. You must claim within the area in which you are. So in other words, I'm a farmer in Princestown, but when I go across to San Fernando, I'm not a farmer across there. So there are some issues that need to be addressed as to how accessible is the incentive program, how do we access the incentive program, and also at the same time, the timeline to access the incentive program. Because we have farmers, as I mentioned previously, waiting a year, 2 years to access the incentive program, and this period is too long. This shouldn't be more than 3 months after application to access the incentive program if we want to drive production. Farmers are self-employed individuals. And what we usually ask for is proper road access to our farms, availability of water, and if it is that we can't access the incentive program, it is going to help boost the agricultural production within Trinidad and Tobago in a timely manner. If we know as farmers that we can purchase our equipment, pesticides and so on, and get back our incentive in a timely manner, I can assure you it is going to drive production in Trinidad. But for quite a number of years, it has not been that way in particular.
Speaking about water, the digging of ponds for farmers to store water and access it, this is one of the issues on the plate.
Right, so, and I can also tell you that since 2014, the ASTT was involved in climate smart projects, which we did small ponds for farmers and we desilted ponds for farmers. And even up to 2018, the Agriculture Society was involved in projects as such. And since then, after that particular period, we have not received proper funding to execute any such programs. And at this point in time, we need these programs because water in agriculture is critical. For any living organism, I'm sure you would agree that you need water to survive.
Yes.
Right? So even last week, I was up there in the Plumitan planting project. And you would see where most of the channels and so on need clearing within the Plumitan area because we need water. And Plumitan is one of the food basket that where most of the cucumbers that is consumed in Trinidad comes from the Plumitan area. Right? They specialize in cucumber, especially in that area, cucumber, sweet corn, and so on. And you could see the need to desilt some of the channels, or most of the channels, right? The farmers are pleading for pumps and so on to get the water into the channel as well. And these things, it doesn't cost a lot to be done, but if, we need the political will at the same time to get the job done, because In some cases, we might know what is needed and we need to get it done. The Orange Grove Planting Project, another food basket, right? There are quite a number of ponds within the Orange Grove area that, we need desilting. Channels need clearing and the ponds need to be desilted. Water availability is very, very, very crucial to production. So, for example, now, right, we're in the height of the dry season and you would see forests. You would see a lot of fires and forest fires and all these things too. We need water in agriculture. And if it is that as a farmer now you're depending on rainfall, you have none. Hence the reason you may see certain commodities or certain food prices may go up, because it comes down to the basic science as who has water available for their production right now.
And some of them may have to buy that water. And this is one of the problems that would discourage them from going into farming.
Correct. Because for those who are knowledgeable and those who may not be knowledgeable, it takes just about 15 minutes to utilize 1,000 gallons of water per half acre of land. Right? So if it is, then we are speaking 7 minutes per acre per 1,000 gallons of water. And yet still, that is not sufficient water for the day, depending on your soil type and so on. So when you have to buy water, again, for agriculture, it's rather expensive. And again, is it enough to sustain production, right? Under the last regime, they spoke about wastewater and management projects and so on to make water available for agriculture. I hope this is something that is still being looked into. I know that there are certain areas, for example, Orange Grove and other areas that has, reservoirs and so on that we can tap into to make it available in Londonville and other areas. There are certain areas that has reservoirs, and we need to, have the necessary equipment as well. So having it and not having the equipment again is an underlying issue. So the pumps and so on, also in Arang, where the pump houses and so on need repairing. And again, we are on the ground, so we would know some of these issues taking place. And I know the minister is also on the ground as well. So I hope that, some of the underlying issues that he's picking up is addressed in the near future. Because under the Ministry of Agriculture, I know that they have a couple pieces of equipment in terms of excavators and so on that is also available for the silting of channels. And I know that they were recently in Drinningham. They did parts of Arangways, and I hope that they move on to the other planting projects such as Orange Grove, Plumitan. Tabakit is a very, very big food basket. Large amount of produce comes out of Tabakit, and I don't think that we give sufficient attention to Tabakit on the whole. If you were to visit Tabakit and look at the quality of produce coming out of that area and the amount of work and dedication coming out from the tobacco farmers, I think that they need more recognition and more support in that area. And in recent visits to the area, all they are asking for, again, is the silting of the water channels, of water available for the agricultural production.
All the farmers are asking for is basic needs, Daryl.
Basic.
It is heart-wrenching, yes, when you see that they have to suffer and lose their crops because of this. You talk about the Plumitan project. 20 years ago, people would have known Plumitan to only produce watermelon and so on. So tell us some more, tell our viewers what else they produce besides, you mentioned cucumbers. Tell us what else they produce
cucumbers
as
would
a
be one
food
of the main
basket.
crops coming out from Plumitan. And when I was an officer within the system, I worked in the Trinidad and Tobago Agribusiness Association, and we introduced sweet corn production to Plumitan. And in my last visit to Plumitan, I was happy to see that quite a few of the farmers continue corn production in a very large volume as well. So we have a lot of corn coming out from Plumitan, we have a lot of cucumbers, and we still have watermelon coming out from there. And we have mixed vegetation, hot peppers, and so on. And it goes back the same thing. And if we don't have the basic needs fulfilled, water and accessibility, we could be spinning top in mud, because government goes, we know the issues.
A key industry that would need water would be the rice industry, right?
Correct.
Right, and where do our rice farmers stand today? They always have a complaint about water efficiency and supply. That would be in central Trinidad?
Central Trinidad, from Cunupia to Jerningham, from Las Lomas to Cunupia coming out to Jerningham, right, is where we would have rice production currently and so on taking place. And then we have water is one issue. In recent times, we saw the availability of proper planting material was an issue. I know that the minister has met several times with our rice farmers, and they are starting to look into some of the issues. And I hope that, you know, as I said, we know what are the issues surrounding the sector for quite some years. Let's hope that some address is being met as it would pertain to water. Because I had one rice farmer last year with a big issue, which would be surrounding the availability of water, and where it is that, you know, WASA was prohibiting the farmer to utilize water at the same time to produce rice. And if it is that they cannot utilize the water, I mean, they're going to go into other crops, which might be sweet potato and corn and mixed vegetation. But when you have all the farmers producing the same commodities in a market that is simply based upon supply and demand, you would see that food prices as well would also lower, which would be good for our consumer. But on the other hand, for our farmers, if the price drops too low, when you place the input costs and give that into consideration, the farmer wouldn't be making sufficient funds to survive and, you know, pay his bills and his workers and so on.
Have our rice production increased due to the fact that we are getting better seeds, technology, and we are collaborating with Guyana?
This has just started, so it is a bit early to say whether we see, you know, a huge expansion into the rice sector. Because the rice sector as well, we could speak about the decrease we may have had in the last couple of years, right? And then, you know, in the last couple of years, some of the farmers suffered for payments and so on. I believe this matter is now sorted out as to the time frame, because in the past we had farmers waiting 6 months, 7 months of payment and still had to, you know, go ahead and run their business, pay their workers and so on. So these issues are now being ratified. So it's a little early to say whether we have an expansion in the rice industry. And I believe that something that we need to speak about also would be the change in the palettes of, you know, the country. Because when you go to the supermarket now, and I'm sure you realize that a lot of persons now are consuming more jasmine and basmati rice and
yes.
these varieties, right?
Yes.
So we need to look at introduction of these varieties into our production.
Our local production.
Yes, because most of these rice that you see now, basmati and jasmine and so on, these are the imported brands, right?
Yeah,
and
they come from India.
And some of the varieties that is being produced here in Trinidad, our local brown rice and so on, maybe besides Old Mark and whatnot, a huge percentage of the rice that was being produced goes back for more pet rice and so on. So we need to look at, so if we're talking about, going back to where you started, identifying certain issues in food importation, the food importation bill, we need to look at what is our daily consumable. And rice being a daily consumable, what are the new varieties of rice, how we could get these varieties into the country, what we need to encourage that, is it training and so on for the rice farmers, the availability of the planting material, and get it into the system, because I'm very sure rice is one of the items, that makes up a big part as a daily consumable on the food import bill. So if we are discussing the reduction of the food import bill, we need, again, look at the varieties that can be introduced, look at the commodities that are being produced and what can be grown here, and how we can expand on these items to successfully reduce the food import bill, if we are serious about doing that.
What about our root crops? Is development heavily in that area?
I should say that, we have moderate. I know the last government was...
We still continue to import a lot of root crops, right? From Grenada and so on.
From St. Vincent and all these other islands, right? I know the last government was also looking at importing yam and bringing
from Nigeria,
plants.
yes.
from Nigeria. I know the former Prime Minister personally made a visit across there. Unfortunately, I haven't heard much of that, saying that the government has been changed as it pertains to.
Why we would need to import yam from Nigeria when we can grow it right here?
Well, actually, they were looking at the planting material, not just the yam itself. The planted material, I believe they were more focused on bringing in the new varieties and the planted material from Nigeria in particular. So I would think that, that is something that is important. The importation of planted material is always necessary, of course, but we need to look lower down the line as the value-added products and so on that we can produce from the root crops. Because, for example, sweet potato is the healthier way to go. If we're thinking about sweet potato, you can make pasta from sweet potato, you can make sweet potato fries. I know that there are other entities in Trinidad that was looking at making wine and so on from sweet potato. So we need to look at, and we don't have at this point in time a proper agro-processing platform. Since TABA was shut down, the Trinidad and Tobago Agribusiness Association was shut down for funding, I believe, in somewhere 2019 or 2020, no, I believe that was 2015, was shut down somewhere around there. We don't have a good agro-processing avenue, right, for some of these things. So I could recall for many years we had cassava ranging from $1.50 to $2.50 per pound for many years, right? And if it is that, we could get some value-added products from this, we would see peeled cassava and so on in the market. But there are other products that we could do, right? There's peeled cassava, there's cassava flour. And if it is that we look at a health perspective, more healthier options, producing flour from cassava and so on. These are some of the areas that we could look at. These are some of the things that we could look at for revenue building opportunities within Trinidad and Tobago coming out from the agricultural sector as well.
Would you say that regional collaboration would help in this area involving CARICOM?
Well, involving CARICOM is one. And earlier on, I had another meeting and we were talking about the agro-processing industry. And we need to look at, whilst we have free trade in CARICOM, if you go through the CARICOM Bay at the wholesale market, you would see, just as you mentioned just now, a number of commodities coming in from the islands, right? Root crops and so on, coming in from the islands. But how much, what is the percentage of our production going back out into CARICOM? And I can assure you it's probably less than 15% of our production going back into CARICOM. And we have entities such as NAMDEFCO that was originally charged with the responsibility of agricultural marketing for Trinidad and Tobago. And, they should be looking into markets regionally and internationally and seeing that we have that opportunity to supply within CARICOM and free trade within CARICOM for agricultural produce. I don't think that we have, at this point, we don't have any programs going on between Trinidad and Tobago and other islands where we have that system of huge commodities going outside there, including commodities such as hot pepper and whatnot. Barbados and Grenada were islands that heavily imported items from Trinidad and Tobago. As a matter of fact, NAMDEFCO was originally set up there was a trade agreement and a protocol between Trinidad and Barbados for the importation of agricultural items. And I don't think that we have that much agricultural produce now heading across there, seeing that we also suffered a lot in terms of diseases that struck the citrus industry in Trinidad, and then we had the closure of citrus growers and so on. So citrus was one of the items going to Grenada and Barbados, including other items, fine items like cucurbits like watermelon and so on. And these are some of the conversations that we need to be having with our heads, right? What is needed in the other islands within CARICOM, and what market is available, and how we could fill the gap for some of these items here. These are some of the conversations that leaders need to be having within CARICOM when we meet.
For discussion and more collaboration.
Yes, more discussion, more collaboration, because I'm sure that there are commodities that, of course, we would need, which I'm sure that there's already here, right? Because if you go through the CARICOM Bay, you would see a lot of imported root crops, right? Dasheen and and all these other Edos and so on.
Okay, Daryl,
Right.
let's continue this. We'll continue this issue of some of the major imports that is contributing to this situation when we come back after the short commercial break.
Thanks.
In our lives, there are moments that need to be remembered. Are you hosting a Ramayana Yagya, religious or cultural event or celebration? Would you like to have it aired live on IETV or recorded for playback later? We will air your program on IETV and IE Radio with your viewers joining locally and internationally. Your family and friends worldwide can view on www.ietvtt.com or listen on ieradiott.com. To make arrangements, call or WhatsApp IETV at 784-9880. Let us record your cherished moments and share it.
Welcome back, viewers, to Hotline with Dookie. Welcome back, Daryl. Before we went to the break, we were talking about some of the major imports that is contributing to this high food import bill annually. Some of the major imports we have include staples like rice, wheat, flour, bread, pasta, and in the meat sector like goat, sheep, and beef, and so on. How would you rate the Agriculture Society for trying to reduce this bill? Do you all collaborate with the government on it?
Well, you need to have, in anything you're doing now, you need to have government cooperation, right? So we had reached out to the Republic of China, the embassy representative that we have here, to look into some of the aspects such as livestock production, cost of feed, input cost into feed, and all these kinds of things, right? And we have seen where we need the government's cooperation, because if you don't have the political will, as I say, we're not going to get the job done. Because at the end of the day, you need that political will to get the job done. And looking into things like, feed as the input cost for the animal sector, the livestock sector, the poultry sector. We recently started having these conversations as well as to where we could head with that. Introduction of other commodities as well into the market in which we can successfully export as well. So I believe for those who are not knowledgeable, there was a time when Trinidad was discussing the exportation of mangoes, and I don't know how many persons, would prefer that. But there are, for example, peaches, right? I'm sure a lot of persons would consume canned peaches, and within that same aspect or perspective, we have some of the best mangoes within from Trinidad and Tobago that we can export.
Daryl, talking a bit about the cocoa industry, how would you rate our cocoa industry in Trinidad and Tobago, seeing that we have one of the finest cocoa in the world?
Right. And I like how you say that, right? And you say it just like any other politician that would have passed through this sector. Trinidad, they would go outside of Trinidad and they'd attend to their meetings and so on, and they would boast, right?
Yes.
That, we Trinidad, we have one of the best cocoa, best quality cocoa. It's award-winning, which is true. It's award-winning. But what are we doing with it? What is the percentage of Trinidad cocoa utilized in the world market at this point in time? What are we doing to increase or expand cocoa production? Because I know, and I can tell you, that is one of the aspects of agriculture, revenue building aspects that we could look at. But back to the youths in agriculture, when they think about cocoa production, just as you say, they would think back to the plantation days.
Yes.
Right? Unless the dollar value that is being offered for the product is right, you're not going to have them youths that we have now jumping to get involved in cocoa production. Right? We have the best cocoa, but what are we doing with it? Right? Are we encouraging our farmers? Are we purchasing enough cocoa from the farmers? Are we producing enough cocoa? Right? At this point in time. And no, we are not producing enough cocoa at this point in time.
Is there something like an international fine cocoa innovation center? It is aimed to boost the high value of the cocoa sector?
Well, we have a lot of programs, as you would say, but I wouldn't say a center. And remember here we also have...
You have different programs.
No, we have the Cocoa Development Company.
Right.
Right, which is also responsible for, cocoa production and so on. But so far, there are a few programs and they are heavily involved in terms of surveillance and so on. But we need to look at, and again, that avenue of value-added products, right? Are we as a government involved in manufacturing of cocoa? Or are we just involved in purchasing and exportation of cocoa? But are we involved in the manufacturing or the end product? This is a question that we need to ask. Or this is a question, this is somewhere that we need to head. We need to be producing our own cocoa products.
Our own
right?
chocolates and coffee and so on.
When you visit other countries that produce cocoa, the government is involved in purchasing and producing cocoa products, right? And there are a number of products, as you are aware, that we can produce from cocoa. Because as it is, we are still, as I just mentioned, in terms of agriculture and so initiatives and new technology, a couple footsteps back. So we are still where you're producing cocoa, you come and you sell it and it's exported, right? When the real value is, so you're giving away something for pennies, right? That is really worth gold as a finished product. Because this is something that competes on the global market. The cocoa or chocolate, as we say, chocolate is sold on the stock market, right? So when you take that into consideration, there are still commodities that we could look at and we could look into and we could invest into at the same time, because things like these, I believe, can, it places Trinidad on the world map. So while it is that we are a country that is known for oil and gas, we have some of the best quality agricultural produce. So shifting a little bit from cocoa, pineapple. We have one of the best tasting quality and varieties of pineapple, the Sugarloaf, that is grown in Trinidad. When you travel outside of Trinidad, you taste a pineapple, it would look nice, but the taste in comparison with what is produced in Trinidad is two different things. Completely different, right? And again, the market for pineapple, the end product, right? Why aren't we producing these things and bagging it, canning it, using it, sending it to our local supermarkets for smoothies and so on? The end product, there's so much that can be done to add value to these products, and I believe it comes back down to the need for a proper agro-processing platform within our country to add value to what is being produced in Trinidad and Tobago.
And again, the pineapple, like the Tableland Pineapple Association, I know the farmers, they face the same basic things we talked about earlier: water shortage, predial larceny, chemicals too expensive, and so on.
Even land issues as well, right? Because certain areas, from my understanding now, has gone into reserve areas in recent times, right? So they are now stating that some areas that were under production have now been classified as oil reserves and so on. So whilst I agree that if it is an oil reserve, the state has the right to utilize the area, my concern as the president of the Agricultural Society would be the continuation of agriculture. Where are these farmers going to continue their trade? Are we just going to move the farmers from the land and don't give them somewhere to continue their trade? Because as a carpenter, mason, or whatever, their trade is different. They could perform their duties anywhere else. But as a farmer, we need the land. So if it is that you displace the farmers, where are we putting them to do the agriculture at the same time? So if a farmer would come to me, and recently I was in Lucira as well, where some of the lands were displaced as well as oil reserves, I told the farmers, don't come off the land. And for a simple reason, yes, the state might have need for the land, but where are the farmers going to continue to trade? Why are we not moving the farmers into a designated area that they could safely do their agriculture and everybody could win? But you just can't displace the farmers like that and expect, what are we going to do with it? Because poverty creates crime. If we have nowhere to do our trade, what are we going to turn to if agriculture is all we know? Crime. Poverty creates crime. Support for agriculture is very, very, very important. And when you started the program, you say only a nation that could feed itself could truly call itself independent. And if we cannot feed ourselves, if we have learned nothing from the days when we had COVID, we haven't learned at all, because when we had COVID, the farmers were very important. We were given passes, the market was open. We was buying from all farmers, whether registered with farmers badge or without farmers badge. So if it is that we could have recognized them as persons being in production that time, why can't we recognize them now? Why are we not?
Daryl, what is the condition to have a farmer badge? And what are the benefits of it?
To have the farmer's badge and to get access to the incentive program, that criteria where it is that you must show where you either own the land, you are renting the land, you have an agreement to utilize the land. We have a huge percentage of the farming community that does not have paperwork for the land, right? Because the first thing, if it is that you're renting land and you ask whoever that you want to affidavit for the land, sometimes these individuals might feel that you're coming after the land to take their land. They don't want to give it to you. Sometimes you might be squatting a piece of land, right? And this is another issue.
I was just about to say that. We have a lot of them squatting, eh?
Yeah, squatting, right? So if I'm squatting a piece of land for housing, how come in 2 to 3 years I could receive a deed of comfort, right? Where I'm squatting, I found the land, I cut it down and I squatted to live on. I could get a deed of comfort. But how come I producing food and after 10, 20 years, I cannot even get a letter of occupancy for the piece of land to be recognized as a farmer, to be recognized by a financial institution? So if it is that the farmers, under the current criteria that we have, do not have any documentation for the lands in which they occupy, these farmers cannot reap from the incentive program.
I see. This is an important situation. Perhaps as government, the Attorney General may address it. Maybe the society needs to put it forward to the government. It's a very good point you make.
I did, but on several occasions, even at the last general meeting of the Agricultural Society, we signed a petition, right, which is going to be delivered to the new Minister of Agriculture, again, asking for consideration to be given to these farmers that are in production, to benefit from the incentive program, to help to drive agriculture, because the percentage of farmers that can access the program, right, is less than. There's a greater percentage of farmers that are in production that cannot reap from the incentive program, right? And then I have nothing against persons who may have inherited land. You know, you have persons outside there inheriting lands, and because they have a certain amount of land, they might purchase a vehicle and, hey, I could get my farmer's badge because I own a certain amount of land and benefit from the incentive program, but they're not even in production. And the farmer who is in production, looking to purchase a vehicle or so on to go to market and harvest his goods and move his equipment and so on, cannot get it because he doesn't meet the criteria. We need to look at the legislation and adjust the criteria if we are serious about fixing agriculture and benefiting the farming community.
We have just about 5 minutes again on the program, Daryl. Aquaculture, does that form part of the society interests?
Of course, all aspects of agriculture, right, forms part of the agricultural sector and falls under the Agricultural Society of Trinidad and Tobago. And again, in years gone by, we saw that we had a big drive in terms of aquaculture, right? And processing plants and so on was to be set up to purchase back tilapia and so on. Again, we do not have that intervention from the government of the day or the past to have that taking place. So now if you're producing tilapia, if you cannot sell it on your own, where are you going with it? And there's a lot of red tape involved into getting into local supermarkets as well. So if it is that we can act as the government, if we can support, right, lend support into that, again, the processing avenue. We purchase the tilapia from the farmers, we make it into filet, and we get it out to the supermarkets and so on. If we can act as a facilitator for that process, it's going to help drive that part of production for the tilapia industry or the aquaculture industry. But again, we don't have that taking place right now. So there's a big decrease in terms of aquaculture taking place within Trinidad and Tobago because of the market and the assistance to get into the market at the same time. A good friend of mine that was involved many years, I was Ken Vera, now he has passed, and he was the person that was championing that, that part of the sector. But we don't have it right now. So again, looking at the food import bill, we need to look at our daily consumables, what we can produce, how to produce it, how to introduce the new varieties, and the marketing aspect if we are to go forward within this sector.
Does the Agriculture Society move throughout the country hosting meetings to encourage farming?
We still do. We still do. Right? So we said, as I said, we was in Plomiton. The month before we was down there at Davie. The month before we was at Lucero. But again, even the society now is very, very, very trapped for cash. Very, very. We have very, very little funding coming forward. And if we are serious, we need to work together and partner to benefit the farming community.
Let's have your closing comments, Daryl. We have just about 2 minutes again. It has been a very interesting conversation. I'm sure, yes, the general public have learned a lot from your knowledge.
And I always look forward to sharing that knowledge. That's one of the main reasons why I placed myself up for election to be the president of the Agriculture Society of Trinidad and Tobago. However, up to this day, the public probably doesn't know I don't receive a salary at this point in time for doing this job that I do now. It is still on suspension from the government of the day. Our salaries and so on is still on hold. But I look forward to working with any government, any minister, any personnel that is for the benefit of the agricultural sector, to the farming community. I look forward to working for development of this agricultural sector. I believe that we have a lot of farmers that is willing to work and give to society, add to society, and get involved in the new technologies and so on. Once the necessary support, the basic support is given to the farming community. And I hope from the consultations that our Honorable Minister is doing at this point in time, that he acquires the necessary information that he needs to go forward. The society is ready and waiting to partner with anybody, any minister, for collaboration in the near future to benefit the farmers at Trinidad.
Yes,
thank you as well for this
welcome.
opportunity to get some of these concerns out there.
Thank you for joining us, Daryl. We hope that this message reaches the Minister of Agriculture, Ravi Ratiram. Food is something that bonds people together. Yes. Thank you, viewers, for joining us. As I was mentioning earlier, food is one common ground that bonds people together.